Call the meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nancy, roll call, please.
Director Benson. Here. Director Hackett.
Here.
Director Howard.
Here.
Vice President Duarte.
Here.
President Von Peter Leopold.
Here. Bert, do we have any special announcements?
Nothing tonight. We have a pretty busy agenda, so nothing tonight for special announcements.
Okay. Public comment. This is the time when members of the public in the audience can address the district on any item that is not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the council, the commission, the board? Thank you. Okay, item 6, reports. Bert?
Yes, President Von Peter Leopold, members of the board. First of all, I'll apologize because I have a lot of things to report, and I know we have a busy agenda, but let me try to get through this as efficiently as I can. On Wednesday, the 22nd of January, the district had a fairly large sanitary sewer overflow along the Iron Horse Trail. Fortunately, it was in a remote area away from direct public exposure, and it didn't result in any overflows or affect any residents or businesses. It also did not make its way to any surface waters. It was completely contained. And I'm going to ask Dan Gallagher to give a little briefing to the board on that overflow.
Thank you, Bert. This spill happened on a Wednesday morning. It was reported to us by the fire department. They were actually called by one of the neighbors who reported what they thought was a fire. It was steam coming up from the water, and that's how they saw it. It was a nice frosty morning. But caused by roots in one of our manholes, we're seeing more and more roots and becoming, a problem that we have to work hard at to maintain. But the root accumulation caused the sewer manhole to overflow. Luckily, all of this spill was captured in the swale, the low area. We were able to pump almost all of the water back into the sewer. Some of the spilled sewage did soak into the ground, but as Bert mentioned, it was in a remote area, so there was no public contact. We were able to get it cleaned up and posted the area for a few days until it was safe, and we reported it to the regional board. Approximately 24,000 gallons of sewage came out of the manhole.
Thank you.
It was our first spill, first spill since December of 2012, too. I wanted to mention that.
A couple of other things for your calendar. On February 11th, San Ramon Mayor Bill Clarkson will be addressing the San Ramon Chamber of Commerce, presenting his State of the City address. The event will be at the Wedgwood Banquet Center. Staff learned late last week about this event, but we think we can still get you in if you're interested, but you have to tell Nancy tonight because the chamber will close off reservations first thing tomorrow. They're purposely holding it open for us alone tonight to get in if you want to go. So if you're interested, let Nancy know. I plan to attend. Similarly, Dublin Mayor Tim Sobrani will be delivering his State of the City address on February 26th at the Shannon Community Center. This has been rescheduled a couple of times now, so if you previously signed up, please confirm with us that the date still works for you. And again, that's February 26th. We've had 4 pieces of correspondence to the board since our last board meeting. They are all related to a proposed cell phone tower at District Reservoir 1A along Beaumac Drive here in Dublin. And you should have copies of all of that correspondence. Let me, for the record, identify what they are. There's a letter of January 21st, 2014 to the Board of Directors from Jonathan and Amy Lambert on West Beaumac Drive. There's a letter of January 23rd, 2014 to the Board of Directors, care of President von Dieter Leopold, from a Mr., I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this. First name is spelled N-G-O-C, last name is Nguyen. I believe you would pronounce that N-G-U-Y-E-N. Mr. Nguyen lives on West Beaumac Drive as well. There is a letter dated December 15th, 2013, which we only received last week, to the City of Dublin Community Development Director from a group that identifies itself as the Rhoda/Beaumac Neighbors Against the Cell Site. And finally, there's a petition entitled, quote, "No AT&T Cell Tower on Beaumac Water Tank," that has 19 electronic signatures. The last of those was dated January 30th, and 50 handwritten signatures. The last of those was dated the 26th of January. We received that petition last week as well. A bit of a comment on this. This is a matter that staff has been pursuing in accordance with our strategic plan. It really will go to the City of Dublin Planning Commission first for their consideration. We're still negotiating the contract terms with AT&T. The point I mean to tell you all of this is that it will not end up before your board for any sort of formal consideration until at least the March timeframe and maybe the April timeframe. But we want to make sure you still hear all these comments from the residents in real time, and when the time comes, we'll also include those comments in your agenda. That's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you. 6B, committee reports. There's the minutes of the Water Committee. Are there any additions anybody would like to make? Okay. Agenda management. Is everything in order in which we wish to talk about
I
it?
think we can. I think it was very good.
Okay. Item 7, approval of minutes. Regular meeting of January 21st.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of January 21st. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion unanimously passed. Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of January 30th.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the special meeting of January 30th. All those in favor?
Aye.
I was not present, so I'll abstain.
Abstain? 4 yeses and 1 abstention. Okay, move on to item number 8, the consent calendar. This is items that typically are routine and can be enacted with one motion. Do I hear a motion?
So
Second?
Second.
So moved and seconded that we approve the items on the consent calendar, items 8A through E. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion unanimously carried. Okay, and now what we're here for tonight. 9A, receive presentation on the status of District Water Supply 2014.
Yes, President von Dieter and members of the board and members of the public that are here, we're going to present a fair amount of information to the board tonight. We're not asking you to make any decisions on anything tonight. Rather, we're seeking your general policy level guidance. We intend to return on the 18th, 2 weeks from tonight, and ask you to consider a declaration of drought emergency, as well as to endorse an action plan in the near term. And then we're targeting the late April timeframe, plus or minus, if conditions don't improve, for the timeframe in which we'll ask the board to make the hard decisions with regard to the drop. So, maybe the overall impression I want to leave with you tonight is this is a very serious situation we're facing, but at this point it's not a desperate situation we're facing. We have time to think about our options and move forward in a logical and thoughtful manner. The presentation tonight will be a little bit of a up and down thing. I'm going to start out and talk about some of the hydrological conditions and the policy decisions that have already been made to set the stage for where we are tonight. Then I'm going to invite Carl Flores from Zone 7 to talk about, well, what does this all mean in terms of the water supply that Zone 7 will be able to provide to the retailers, DSRSD included. And then she'll be followed by Dan Gallagher, our operations manager, who will talk about some ideas staff has for the action plan. And again, we're not asking you to approve anything, but we'd certainly love to hear your input. If there's ideas in that action plan that you are absolutely enamored by, speak up. If there's ideas that, you think staff is going off the proverbial deep end, please let us know. We'd love to hear that as soon as we can. And if there's ideas that you think we've missed on it, now would be the time to identify them. So we'll cobble that information together and come back to you for the endorsement community. So let me start. Let's start off. Which icon is it?
You're the far left.
So I'm going to be talking just big picture hydrological conditions and policy about the status of our water supply in 2014. As I mentioned before, what I want to cover here is the hydrological conditions and the policy framework that we're facing. And then Ms. Flores will be talking about the effect on Zone 7, and Mr. Gallagher will be talking about district responses that are being considered. In terms of precipitation, and all the data I'm going to be giving you is focused on the northern Sierra, where our water supply originates, basically on the Federal River watershed. The numbers are different, obviously, in every area of the state. They're different locally, but their pattern is the same throughout the state. Basically, it's a pretty bleak hydrological picture. Let me start off with 6 of the last 7 years have been classified as below normal or critically dry water years. 2011 was an above normal year. 2013, calendar year 2013, was the driest year on record in California. January of 2014 was I believe, although I haven't seen this in writing, but I believe January 2014 is going to be recorded as the driest January in California recorded history. Bottom line is the watershed in Northern California from which we receive our water right now has received about 9% of the amount of water that they receive in an average year. As you can see from the graphic, and Dan, can you give me the little pointer? Yeah, thank you. Actually, the water year we're in is actually shaping up to be worse than a repeat of the 1976-77 drought. There's a lot of lines on this graph. Let me just point to a couple of them. Okay, so if I can hold my hands. The shaded blue area represents the average year in terms of precipitation. The green line is the wettest year on record, which was 86 or 87. 1976 and 77 is this red line, and we are tracking, this is a 1920 drought, which was pretty severe at the time. I wasn't around then. And the line that we're tracking right here that terminates right there is the year we're in right now. And as I said, we've received about 9% of the average precipitation to date. So what does that mean in terms of snowfall? Because really it's the snowfall that counts for us. A similar graphic here for snowfall, again, maximum year of record, 76, 77, in the current year to date. And this, by the way, is through February 4th, so this includes the rainfall we've received this weekend. This is real-time data. So right now we're at about 6% of average where we should be at this time of the year. We're only at about 4% of what's the typical season maximum, which happens on or about April 1st. And again, in terms of snowfall, we're worse off right now than we were at this time of the year in the 76, 77 drought. That's what's happened in the past. Of course, the future is anybody's guess, but the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, issues 3-month and 1-month precipitation outlooks for the whole country. Brown is bad. This is 1 month. 1 month projection. You can see that in California, 1 month is projected to be below normal or an equal chance of above or below normal in Northern California. That's, not a bad picture overall. When you look at 90-day forecast, this would run out through about the middle of, actually, I guess now through the end of April. You can see all of California is projected to be in a below normal rainfall pattern. So, again, it's been bad for the last 12 to 13 months. So it's projected to continue to be bad during this traditional wet season. Storage in Lake Oroville. I use Lake Oroville. There's a number of reservoirs around the site, but that's the reservoir on which the state stores most of its water that we receive. Currently, it's at 36% of capacity, which is about 54% of where it would normally be at this time of the year. And again, it's lower than in 1976 and 77. And more importantly, when you think about that, now that same reservoir is serving about 70% more people than it served in 76 and 77. And again, these are the lines. It's tough to see with the lighting here, but this shaded is average. The red is 76, 77, and this is where we are right now.
How about in terms of agriculture? Would be serving about the same amount?
In water deliveries, yeah, there's probably been some change in the amount of irrigated acreage, I would imagine, but probably about the same. You have to understand that a state project is, there's two very large agricultural contractors on the state project, and of course, even here in the Livermore-Amber Valley, we have ag in the Livermore area in South Livermore. But the state water project is by and large an M&I, municipal and industrial project. So here's a history of water delivery allocations from the Department of Water Resources. We started off in November of 2013, that's traditionally their first allocation. They said 5%. That was a big wake-up call because that was the lowest initial allocation that contractors ever received. Zone 7 being the state water contractor in Livermore-Amber Valley. February 1st, they came out with their allocation on February 1st and basically reduced 5% to 0%. The allocations are revisited monthly. There'll be another one coming out on March 1st, thereabouts, or April 1st. And then the final allocation happens on May 1st. And this little graphic just presents the historic allocations that we've received since about 2007, since really the start of this current spell of dry weather. You can see at 100% allocations up there. I just plugged in some triangles just to show you 100%. The state project cannot deliver 100% allocation. Its long-term reliability is about 60% because of restrictions on pumping due to endangered species, and certain facilities were never built. So that's the long-term average. This red line is the average of the last 8 years. So we've been receiving over the last 8 years less than what the long-term reliability is projected to be. And then this is just a series of graphs showing the reliability each of those years. As I mentioned, 2011 was a wet year, so we got a little bit more than average. 2014 right now is projected to be zero. If it rains a little bit in the next couple of months, that may come up, but it's not going to come up significantly. It won't come up to average, it will come up very significantly. There's still pretty good. It's been a little bit of good news. The Department of Water Resources has stated that they'll try to make what's called carryover deliveries from 2013 to Zone 7. This is water that Zone 7 could have received in 2013 and is in storage. There was some concern early on that we wouldn't even be able to get that. The department has said they're going to try to make those deliveries to Zone 7. DWR is also trying to put some water into Lake Del Valle. The pumps, despite the 0% allocations, are still operating at the moment. And really, moment being the key word. We don't know how long they're going to continue to operate. Another bit of good news, and this is a long-term bit of good news, through the foresight of your predecessors on this board, we have a very aggressive recycled water program. Actually, 4 predecessors. I see Georgine looking at me. She was part of that team. We have a very aggressive recycled water, so 19% of our water sales, total water sales in our district comes from recycled water, which is 100% reliable, so that tempers the effect of the drought. One bullet I don't have up here, Zone 7 has a fair amount of water stored underground as well, locally here in the Livermore-Amber Valley, but we don't want to tap into that because we don't know know how the rest of the year is going to go or how next year will be. It also rained a little bit this past weekend, and the near-term forecast is, as you can see from, I think somebody's iPhone or Droid talks about a little bit of rain coming over this week. So there is some good news in the forecast. Some policy level actions that have been taken. January 15th, the U.S. Department of Agriculture declared Contra Costa and Alameda counties a natural disaster area due to the drought. January 17th, Governor Brown proclaimed a state of emergency and called for Californians to reduce their water use by 20%. On January 26th, at the Zone 7 board, excuse me, their board of directors declared a state of drought emergency within its service area, and immediately the Zone 7 general manager followed up with, based on authority given to her by the board, to establish appropriate levels of conservation, basically at 20% curtailment.
Is that 20% after the 20% we've already attained, or is that 20%?
Well, that's a good question.
From which baseline is that 20%?
No, that's a very good question. Even when Governor Brown came out to 20%, it begs the question, 20% of what? What everybody is interpreting that is 20% of either 2013 demands or 20% of what you otherwise would have used in 2014. That's the interpretation that everybody's using. It's not related to the long-term per capita reduction goals under SB 7X7 that have to be met by 2020. That's a long-term.
Which we've already achieved.
Which we've already seen. So, we're upcoming board actions tonight. First of all, several things that are ongoing, and the operations manager will cover some of those, or several actions that we've already taken and are pursuing, just on staff's authority. Tonight is this informational briefing. On February 18th, 2 weeks from now, we're going to ask you to consider adopting a state of emergency, endorsing the 20% water use curtailment target in parallel with Zone 7 in the state, and endorse what we put together with your input tonight for a drought outreach program. I guess the next one is saying the same thing. In late April, unless conditions improve, we're going to, at that point, but that'll be the time where you have to make tough decisions, basically considering which drought stage you're in terms of water rates. 20% curtailment would correspond to you moving to a stage 2 rate condition, and also possibly considering mandatory water reduction measures. So that's kind of our layout. It might seem like we're a little bit behind with, I got another slide here. I think this one is fine. The next speakers are Ampara and Dan Gallagher, but what I wanted to do is give you a little flavor of what some other agencies are doing. We talked about Zone 7, of course. Tonight, Pleasanton is considering a declaration of state of shortage and a 20% voluntary curtailment. Livermore doesn't have any action scheduled on the agendas that they now have posted through their meetings of February 11th. I fully expect them to do something, but they haven't posted that yet. Cal Water, who's the other retailer in the valley, on their website are calling for their customers to use water efficiently. Alameda County Water District, 20% voluntary. San Francisco PUC, 10% voluntary. Marin Municipal, 25% voluntary. East Bay Mud and Contra Costa Water District have not adopted percentages and are basically getting the message out there to use water wisely unless their websites are not fully updated with this information on the website. So that's kind of the state of affairs we have right now. Maybe I'll pause and give you a chance to ask me any questions before I turn it over to Ampara and talk about the estimates for Zone 7 and water supply.
I have a question. Does anybody else have a question for Bert? I have a question. Is there any way that we can realistically adopt a gallons per day per person usage rather than the 20%? Because the 20% always ends up not being fair to the person who's already saved 20 and 10 and 30.
We need to think about how we message this. The 20% goal is a system. We're interpreting that as a system-wide goal that we have to curtail 20%. How we message that to individual customers and what we ask of individual customers are right at the heart of what you're asking. Somebody that's using 5 or 6 cubic or 100 cubic feet of water, and I just had a conversation with one of our customer service reps this morning. It's like, do they have to conserve 20%? No, tell them they're doing a pretty darn good job right now. Ask them if they can do a little bit more. We would certainly appreciate it, but that's not where we're going to get the savings. We're going to get the savings from the outdoor irrigation and for the people that are using water in the second tier of our rate structure and the third tier of our rate structure. So I don't anticipate us setting a numeric goal in terms of gallons per day per customer or gallons per day per person or even a percent reduction. Rather, for the residential customers, it's going to be a message of, just try to do as much as you can with public outreach, and we're hoping to be able to reach that 10% indoor conservation target that way.
Okay.
And then are we also doing some, taking the water meters, bringing those back and changing them out for recycled water?
We will be talking about that. We have a number of water meters that are out there. We call them construction meters that people using water tanks, water trucks use where they get water from our fire hydrants. They use that for various purposes throughout the city. One of the big users is construction projects. They use it for compaction on soils and for dust control. And we have already started recalling those. I think a formal notice will go out. It went out today. So we formally recalled all those meters and we'll be exchanging those for recycled water meters. So that's an action that's already underway that Dan will talk about.
I mean, realistically, that's fairly optical. I mean, there's not a lot of water goes out to the trucks. It's when the drop rates kick in and we really have to bring 20% out of the system as well to make this 40 happen.
Absolutely. But, in the situation we're in, obviously every drop counts. If we're looking at 20% system-wide, doing the arithmetic on our system means we need to reduce our water deliveries, on the order of 2,500 acre feet. So an acre foot here or there, even if it's one construction meter, it starts becoming pretty valuable. So.
I mean, the difficult part from our perspective is our district stepped forward early and has already run 20% out of based on usage on previous requests. And do it again is going to be tough. This is a good community, we'll do it, but it's troubling that we've already done it once and now we're going to do it again.
I appreciate your concerns, and I really believe the community will do what's right. And they've always responded to these kind of requests, and I anticipate and suspect that the same thing will happen this time around.
Actually, what Rich said is what concerned me, because our community has stepped up and has already saved that initial 20% that we asked of them 2 years ago. So I don't want to penalize those people that are already participating, but obviously we have to encourage others.
Well, it's interesting because I was over at Country Waffles here in Dublin, and they had already put a note on their door that they are asking water. They're asking to serve. If you want water, you have to ask. So people are already stepping up and helping out.
And that wasn't even our notice. They must have gotten that from one of their other restaurants or saved it from the last drought. So I mean, I'm glad that the manager at that facility was aware enough and put the sign up, even without any
that's
from
really
us.
great.
That's an indication of the right thing.
I think all of us, and I think the community is good in stepping up.
It might not hurt to send someone like that a letter of thanks from the board for him stepping up and doing something on his own.
For being a leader,
Yeah.
before you were even asked.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with this, Ampara, I'm going to ask you to step up and use this. Ampara Flores is with Zone 7, and I'd like to also acknowledge Angela Ramirez Holmes, a Zone 7 board member in the audience here. Ampara works, I'm not sure which division exactly you work in. I call it Water Resources, because every time we talk about where your water is coming from and how all this fits together, she's the person that's on board. I'm not sure that's the exact title.
Integrated planning.
Integrated planning. So this is, the retailers received a version of this presentation about a week ago. We thought it was wonderful. I think she was using us as kind of a dry run, no pun intended, but it was a great piece of work, and then she subsequently presented it to her board, and I asked the general manager to have Ampara come by today to present it to you, because I think you need to understand why Zone 7 is asking for 20% and not some other number. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board, DSRSD staff, and members of the public. As Bert mentioned, my name is Ampara Flores. My name is Ampara Flores, and I'm an engineer in our integrated planning group. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about our water supply conditions, both at the state level and at the local level. So tonight I'll just start with a brief overview of the State Water Project. As most of you undoubtedly know, the State Water Project was constructed in the 1960s by the state of California. It's maintained and operated and managed by the Department of Water Resources. Just going to walk through some of the key facilities. We've got Orville Reservoir up north that captures water from the Feather River watershed, which is the main source of water supply for the State Water Project. And then we've also got Zone 7 is in this area. We've got San Luis Reservoir south of us. That's essentially a surface water bank. So water that we have left over from the previous year, this is called carryover, water that various State Water Project contractors have saved up from the previous year for a dry year is normally stored in San Luis Reservoir in Merced County. The solid blue is the California Aqueduct. Farther south, we've got Kern County. There are a couple of groundwater banks in that area, Semi-Tropic Water Storage District and Coelho Water District. Zone 7 also has access to storage in those two groundwater banks. We've got over 100,000 acre-feet of water stored in these groundwater banks for dry years. Just going to zoom in here to the Delta area and the South Bay Aqueduct system. We've got water pumped from the Delta by the Banks pumping plant. That water is pumped into the aqueduct and delivered south to Central and Southern California. Over 90% of the water flows south, but we do have about 5% of the water entering the South Bay Aqueduct system to serve agencies like Zone 7 Water Agency, Santa Clara Valley Water District, and Alameda County Water District. Water from the Delta enters the South Bay Aqueduct. That water can also be pumped up into Lake Del Valle and released when needed. Key message here really is that all of Zone 7's imported water supplies are delivered through the Delta and the South Bay Aqueduct system. On a normal year, over 80% of Zone 7's supply is imported. So water that would be delivered through the Delta would be, and the South Bay Aqueduct system would include our Table A allocation. So that's the amount of water that the state provides to us every year, and the amount of water varies every year. As Bert mentioned, this year that allocation is 0%. They also deliver carryover water, as I mentioned. That's water that we saved from the previous years. Any dry year transfer water available would also be delivered through the South Bay Aqueduct system. And any exchanges amongst the State Water Project contractors would also be delivered through the South Bay Aqueduct. This would include the water that we have stored in Semi-Tropic and Coelho. As you can see here, it's located south of us. The only way that water would really get to us is through some kind of exchange through the Delta with other contractors. And finally, we do have a transfer agreement with Byron Bethany Irrigation District. They're actually located in this area. We have access to 2,000 to 5,000 acre-feet of water from Byron Bethany Irrigation District. That water is also delivered through the South Bay Aqueduct. There are a number of factors that affect the operations of the State Water Project. This includes reservoir storage, so they look at how much storage, how much water is currently stored in Lake Orville, as Bert described. It's at 36% of capacity, approximately at this time. They look at how much water they expect to run off into the reservoir. They also have some target reserves for Lake Orville. And then finally, of course, it's going to be important how much of that water is actually accessible. Unfortunately, they're having problems with valves up in Lake Orville, so there's actually a significant amount of water, 800,000 acre-feet of water up in Lake Orville that's stored that's not going to be available as a supply. They also look at water demands from the system. They look at demands from the State Water Project contractors, but they also have to look at senior water rights holders upstream. So they look at senior water rights holders in the Feather River watershed and their needs, and they also look at users in the Delta. So they have higher priority over the water supply relative to the State Water Project. Regulations have a big impact on operations. There are upstream requirements related to temperature and flows that protect fish upstream, and there are also requirements in the Delta related to protection of endangered and threatened species. I'm sure you've heard a lot about issues related to the decline of delta smelt and salmon. Water quality is an important consideration. It's becoming more and more important with this drought. There's very limited fresh water entering the Sacramento River, which is making the delta more salty. And when the pumps are on at the State Water Project, that has the potential to draw in more salt water into the system, so they have to take that into consideration. Part of the consideration that they also need to take into account is what level of salinity are the contractors willing to accept. That's a discussion that we're having right now in terms of whether they can continue pumping water out of the delta. Obviously, the facilities that are available will have a big role to play in how much water can be moved throughout the system. And finally, most importantly, hydrologic conditions. So if you look at both snowpack and runoff conditions, as Bert described, snow has been very minimal this year. I think that from the latest snow survey, they're looking at 7% of the April 1st average that they normally expect. So snowpack normally peaks on April 1st before it starts to melt and starts running off into the rivers, etc. So very minimal snow, and of course, 2013 has been very dry, driest year on record. 2014, it looks like 2014 is trying to beat that record. So as of January 31st, DWR reduced the Table A allocation to 0%. State Water Project contractors have been told that we will receive only carryover water as operations allow. So they will do their best to deliver carryover water that we've banked previously. Just talk briefly about the impacts of regulations. Since 2007, there's been a lot of concern and response to the decline of delta smelt and salmon, etc. As a result of the biological opinions or the legal findings related to these threatened and endangered species, the State Water Project has lost access to about 4 to 18% of the maximum Table A amount. So if you take all of the contracts for the State Water Project contractors and the maximum amount that we could expect to see, that totals about 4.2 million acre feet. Zone 7's Table A amount is 80,619. To put that in perspective, about 2%. So if you look at 2013, about 600,000 acre feet of water was lost because of these regulations. For Zone 7, that means about 2% of that is 12,000 acre feet in 2013 that we didn't have access to. With the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, the idea is that we would be able to access, to capture this water supply while still protecting the environment. So what's the worst case scenario for imported water? Unfortunately, this has already happened. As of our special board meeting last week, we were still at 5%. We were anticipating that we would lose our Table A allocation based on what we were hearing from the state. So we lost 4,000 acre feet of water from that reduction of Table A amount to 0. We're also anticipating that Delta diverters, including our partner Byron Bethany Irrigation District, will be asked to stop pumping. They've already been given notice that that is possible. They've been asked to minimize their pumping. And so we are anticipating no BBID supply for Zone 7. So that's a minimum of 2,000 acre feet. We could ask up to 5,000 acre feet, but at this point we anticipate receiving 0 under a worst case scenario. Finally, pumping into Delta could be completely stopped because of minimal fresh water flowing in, again under a worst case scenario, and there would be no delivery from the Delta. As I pointed out, all of the imported supplies have to go through the Delta South Bay Aqueduct system. So this would then mean that we would have no access to our carryover water in San Luis Reservoir, that's about 11,000 acre feet, no access to any dry air transfer water if there's any water available, and no access to State Water Project exchanges. So this would include, most importantly, about 20,000 acre feet of water that we had anticipated during a dry condition such as this year. So given this information, what does this mean for our local water supply conditions? I've just talked to you about what's happening at the state level and with our imported supplies. Well, from a local perspective, it really means under a worst case scenario, we would have no water supply from the South Bay Aqueduct. We've had very minimal rainfall. We have about 10% of our supply that comes from the local watershed from Arroyo del Val. But with the minimal rainfall, we're looking at 40% lower than January 1977 conditions. We're looking really at 3 sources of supply for the valley. We've got our groundwater basin, we've got Lake Del Valle, whatever water is stored in there, and we've got recycled water. Lake Del Valle normally receives runoff from our watershed. As I've said, there's been very little runoff, so really all the water in Lake Del Valle is water that has to be pumped in by the state. The state is currently filling Lake Del Valle. So again, worst case scenario, we've got groundwater, Lake Del Valle, and recycled water in the valley. Let us just step back and take a look at what our water supply outlook looked just 2 weeks ago. It's amazing how much has happened over the last couple of weeks. So as of mid-January, we were looking at our water sources. We've got groundwater. Typical pumping, we would expect about 14,000 acre-feet of pumping. We could push that a little bit harder, stress our groundwater basin a little bit, but we could probably get another 7,300 acre-feet out of the basin. So that's 21,000. We also have Lake Del Valle. There's currently, like I said, there's no local water in there. It's all State Water Project water. But based on how that water would normally be allocated, we would have access to about 10,100 acre-feet of carryover water. And then we've got the South Bay Aqueduct system. We were expecting some carryover that's still in St. Louis. That would be at about 7,900. We've got pump back from Semi-Tropic Water District. We've got pump back from Coelho. That's about 20,000 together. We've got our Table A allocation, 5% at 4,000. And then we have our BBID supply at 2,000 acre-feet. Total, we were looking at about 64,000 acre-feet of water. For those who like to think in MGD, we're talking about nearly 60 MGD of water available as of 2 weeks ago that we had anticipated. Well, now we're in worst case scenario planning. Unfortunately, much of that water has literally evaporated. And we're looking at Lake Del Valle is not completely full, so we have less than the 10,000 we had anticipated. And then the South Bay Aqueduct, the 1,100, is a conservative estimate of what's already been delivered and what we expect to have been delivered by, say, mid-February. And if suddenly they stop operating the South Bay Aqueduct, this is what we would receive. Now, every week that the South Bay Aqueduct, every day that it's operating, this is looking a little bit better, so that's going up. But we're really looking at a significant loss of supply. We're talking about a 54% reduction in the water supply that we had anticipated. So what does this mean from a supply and demand perspective? I've got 2 charts here. I've got one chart on the left that shows without conservation. This is the anticipated Zone 7 deliveries without conservation. This includes retailers and ag water. And then we've also got this bar chart here that shows with conservation. So this already shows the conservation based on the 20% that statewide the governor has asked for and Zone 7 has also requested. So as I said, about 2 weeks ago our supply was up here. Now our supply is down here. If we stress the groundwater basin, get a little bit more out, we're looking at 29,300 acre-feet of water. So we're looking at a shortage of 42% without any conservation. With 20% conservation, we're looking at about 27% shortage. This 20% conservation, by the way, we looked at it, we applied that to February to December timeframe, since obviously we're already past January. You can also look at it from indoor versus outdoor use. The lower sort of pink shaded area here represents indoor uses. You can see that with our groundwater basin supply, our local supply, we will be able to meet health and safety needs or indoor needs, and a bit more of, or some fraction of outdoor needs with additional groundwater pumping. So bottom line, we're looking at a potential worst case scenario of 27 to 42% shortage, but we still expect to meet our health and safety needs for the valley. So what is Zone 7 doing in response to these conditions? Well, the first thing we did was we looked at what are our other supply opportunities. So We've thought hard about what's in the valley. You've already seen some of these numbers. We've got our groundwater basin, we've got Lake Davao, we've got the South Bay Aqueduct. We actually also have the chain of lakes. There's some water. There's some water in the chain of lakes. There's about 12,000 acre-feet of water that's sitting. Most of that is sitting in Lake I, but currently inaccessible. So the hashed area is water that's not currently accessible to Zone 7, but may be available in the system somehow. So groundwater, we've got our pumping operations. We actually have another 37,300 acre-feet of water sitting in our groundwater basin, but it's currently not accessible because maybe our wells are not in the right place, or we don't have enough capacity to pump it. In Lake Davao, there's about 10,000 acre-feet of water that's considered dead pool, that's inaccessible. And the South Bay Aqueduct, I've walked you through, there's a lot of water that's suddenly becoming inaccessible to us. Chain of lakes, I've talked about that. And then we also have some interties that we're looking at. DSRSD has a few small interties with East Bay Mud. We're looking at potential opportunities to use that. There's also an intertie between Lawrence Livermore Lab and the SFPUC system. We're having discussions with them to look at what opportunities are there to access those supplies. There's also water in the system that's reserved by others, reserved for other people. This represents retailer pumping quota and other amounts of groundwater that's pumped by private well owners, by ag, etc. We've got water in Lake Davao. Lake Davao is a state water project asset. It's a state water project facility, and that's meant to serve all of the South Bay contractors. So water in Lake Davao will have to be shared with the other contractors. So just to make a note, our basin is currently 57% full. Another thing to keep in mind as we're thinking about how much of groundwater we want to be able to access, et cetera, is, well, we know 2014 is looking bad. What about 2015? So that's another consideration, that we don't really want to pump our groundwater basin down. So anyway, the bottom line, we need some actions to access the additional supply to bolster the supply that we currently have under worst case conditions. We're doing a number of things as part of our drought response plan. In terms of accessing our groundwater basin, we've got a couple of new wells that we're going to be installing. One is at Chain of Lakes, in the Chain of Lakes area. There's another one that we're looking at in the Valley Avenue area. We're also going to talk to the retailers about doing additional pumping. So some of the retailers have more pumping capacity than they actually used. We may need them to pump more from the groundwater basin because they have access to other areas of the main basin that's currently inaccessible to us. And the agricultural customers actually may need to pump more. They're going to experience potential severe cutback in their water supply. They can supplement that with additional pumping. And we're also going to need to develop a drought pumping optimization and monitoring plan to protect the main basin. Obviously, we want to use it as wisely as possible. Timeline shown to the right here. Some of, as you can see, a new well may be installed as early as the summer of this year. We're going to keep working on a second well, and we're going to continue working with the retailers and other partners on some of these other actions. For Lake Davao, we've already asked DWR to fill the lake with as much water as possible. While the South Bay Aqueduct is operating, we want to have as much state water project water locally available as possible. So that's already in the works. We're also looking to, we're talking with the other South Bay contractors about potential exchange opportunities. Santa Clara Valley Water District has access to San Luis Reservoir, while Alameda County Water District and Zone 7 do not. So there may be opportunities there for some exchanges. And we're looking at the feasibility of accessing dead storage in Lake Davao. At the state level, we're in close communication with the state, negotiating with them to maximize the delivery of surface water supply into the valley. We're coordinating with other state water contractors, and we're working hard really to communicate Zone 7's needs and the risks to the area. Zone 7 is one of the most highly dependent agencies on the state water project. Chain of Lakes, we're already capturing as much water as we can from the mining operations. We recently installed a pipeline to recover water that would otherwise be pumped out of the valley. That water is now being stored in Cope Lake, and we are going to build an intertie between Cope Lake and Lake I so that the water that's captured is recharged into the main basin through Lake I. We're also looking at the feasibility of a packaged water treatment plant at the lake. Since there is water sitting there, we're looking at the possibility of actually treating that water and serving that to the customers if necessary. Again, some of these efforts are going to be going through 2014 and possibly even through 2015. And as I mentioned, there are interties that exist right now in East Bay Mud. We're working to look at potential supplies that could be wheeled through East Bay Mud system and delivered through to DSRSD. We're also working with SFPUC to talk about potential use of their intertie at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And finally, we've already been talking to East Bay Mud about a larger reliability intertie. We're going to begin working on that. Again, that won't be completed in time for this year, but it will certainly put us in a better position for next year and later years. So next steps, we are going to continue coordinating with the retailers. We met with the retailers on January 27th. And we're going to continue to work with the retailers to work on solving or responding to these drought conditions cooperatively. We're also going to coordinate with our regional partners. This includes the South Bay contractors and other water agencies in the area. We're going to evaluate, as I mentioned, all potential sources of supply and deliver more Amador Valley. We're going to be looking at imported surface water, trying to maximize our deliveries from the State Water Project, optimizing our groundwater pumping, looking at other sources of water that could be wheeled into our service area, investigating the use of the chain of lakes, and supporting accelerated recycled water projects that can reduce outdoor use demand this summer. And finally, we'll be reporting to our board regularly and providing monthly updates. At our April board meeting, we'll be presenting our annual sustainability report. By April, we should have a much better idea of the hydrological conditions for 2014. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Amparo, on the water that's currently flowing into Lake Del Valle, you have calculations, if they did not stop delivering, how long would it take to fill it up?
It's going to take about 5 to 6 weeks. It's about 192 acre feet per day right now. The water is flowing in.
And you also mentioned that the senior water rights of some of the users upstream are take priority over downstream. Are they going to have any cutbacks on theirs as well?
Yeah, I think everyone's experiencing some cutbacks. So as I mentioned, the State Water Resources Control Board already sent notices to pre-1914 water rights holders that they may have to curtail their pumping from the Delta.
Are there any senior rights on Del Valle?
No, it's a State Water Project owned facility.
You have to share it.
We do.
Share the South Bay, that's about
We
it.
share with the South Bay contractors. We do have water rights on Arroyo Del Valle watershed, but as I mentioned, there's no water coming from that.
And if we lose the pumps, we lose access to the water bank down south.
If they stop pumping, we're down to groundwater basin in Lake Del Valle.
Thank you very much, Amparo.
Thank you, Albert.
Dan, Dan Gallagher is our operations manager. We've put together some ideas preliminarily for response here at the agency to this drought condition. We're not asking for any decisions tonight. We're looking for input at a conceptual level, and we'll take your input and hopefully assemble something that works for you all and present that to you in 2 weeks. So, Dan.
Thank you, Bert. President Von Heater, Leopold, members of the board. I want to explain some of the things that we've already done and the other ideas and concepts that we've been working on. And Bert's asked me to serve as the drought coordinator for this event, so I one of the extra roles I'll be working on as the coming weeks and months go by. Some of the actions that we've already taken to date, we've already turned off the irrigation at 6 of our pump stations. We're going to be turning off the irrigation at the rest of our pump stations. Most of these irrigation systems are very small. In fact, only 2 of our pump stations have enough landscaping that we have a maintenance contract to keep the landscaping up. So by and large, these are just a few trees and bushes that we have, but we will be turning off the irrigation system at those pump stations. 6 of those, however, are fairly close to recycled water, so we're going to be evaluating possibly hooking them up to recycled water. We've already stopped cleaning our sewers with potable water and switched over to recycled water. We've done that in past years. Again, we've done that again this year, and it will conserve some water there too. We've stopped all hydrant flushing, and this is a typical practice that we perform in order to do flushing of the water mains to remove sediment and rust and things like that that might accumulate in the water mains. But we've stopped doing that in all but problem areas. And we're also, as was mentioned earlier, exchanging out the potable construction meters for purple recycled water construction meters. So that's already underway. Some of the possible initiatives that we're evaluating and looking at include increasing the use of recycled water throughout the service area, and evaluating various conservation price signals is another one of the tools we'll be looking at. I'll talk some more about that. We're also looking at leveraging our partnerships with our neighbor agencies, increasing our public outreach efforts, and we're going to be, of course, monitoring the water supply closely throughout the wet season, which will probably extend through the April or perhaps longer season, but that depends on what Mother Nature brings us. And we'll continue working very closely with Zone 7 so that we understand what their limitations are as this water supply situation continues to develop. Some of the possible ways to increase recycled water use throughout our area, and we're looking right now at possibly running temporary piping to Western Dublin and also to Santa Rita Jail. Over the last couple of years, the district has purchased about a mile of plastic pipe, and we have that in storage in 2 different locations. That pipe was purchased primarily for emergency preparedness, and we had an earthquake in mind when we bought that in case we needed to jump around broken water mains. But we may purpose that pipe for recycled water by pushing recycled water through storm sewers to get underneath busy intersections and things like that. I've already met with the city, talked to them about it, and I'll likewise be meeting with the city of Pleasanton to look at possibilities for maybe doing this. We're also evaluating the possibility of allowing residents to come to the wastewater treatment plant and pick up recycled water. We have a loading station at the treatment plant. We right now permit and allow contractors to come get recycled water at the treatment plant. We may be able to allow residents to do that. This could be residents that have a tank they put in the back of the pickup and they want to try to keep some of their trees and bushes and things like that alive. We're going to work real hard at switching out Dublin High School to use recycled water. We also want to be able to try to look at converting more customers to recycled water when the recycled water service is nearby. And we do have a number of customers like that. And we'll, as I mentioned before, we're going to look at converting our existing pump station to use recycled water for their irrigation systems too. By the way, you might wonder why we would have pump stations that aren't using recycled water already, and in most cases, these pump stations were built before the recycled water came. And then the recycled water mains were added later, and we've just never converted our pump stations over for that. Some of the conservation price signals that we're going to be looking at, using AMI, and you might say, well, what's AMI? Well, that's the system the board approved that has very recently been installed, and this is to allow our water meters, our customer water meters, to transmit data to this office so that we can tell what's going on out there in the system. That system has some tremendous capabilities. And we're not sure exactly how to tap into all of that, but we're evaluating that right now. There's a very good possibility we may be able to notify customers when they're approaching the next tier, give them a price signal that, hey, you might want to look at conserving water because the cost of your water is going to go up if you go over the next tier. We can also use AMI to alert our staff if our customers have leaks. The system has the ability to flag us when it sees 24/7 around-the-clock use, which normally indicates a leak or an irrigation valve stuck on or something like that. And if we need to and we put restrictions, or are forced to put restrictions in place, it can also tell us if we have customers that are not listening to the restrictions that they've been given for their outdoor water use. Another possibility, there are existing rebate programs for water saving things like toilets, washing machines, and what have you. We may want to consider adding a kicker to that, basically putting a little more money on the table so that people have a little bit more encouragement to buy those water efficient appliances. We also have our Save Our Water campaign, which is already on our website, gives lots of good ideas. We're going to continue to promote that, and that becomes a very ready resource that people can go to get ideas about how to save water at home. And then we're also going to look at what we're calling a conservation pays program. This might be a program where if someone conserves a considerable amount, that they may be eligible for a rebate. We're looking for something like, maybe if they save 50% compared to the same period last year, the district provides them with a rebate on their water bill of some kind. Just some ideas at this point. We're not committed to anything, but these are the things that we are looking at. We want to continue to leverage some partnerships that we have around the valley, accelerating our plans to use the 3 interties that we already have with East Bay Mud. Again, where I would like to caution, though, of course, using those interties would depend on East Bay Mud's capability of sending us water. They may be in dire straits right along with us, so we'll have to see how this unfolds as the months proceed. We're also going to continue East Bay Mud to accelerate connecting some of the customers in San Ramon to recycled water that are close to some of the piping that's there. That's been an ongoing project, but all of those sites require retrofitting, which is expensive and takes time, and we're hoping that East Bay Mud can accelerate that. We're talking about running the temporary pipes to areas, and we want to talk to Pleasanton about running them to maybe Pleasanton parks and schools. There are some areas that are close to the treatment plant where the city of Pleasanton may be able to use recycled water. And then again, or I should say, Pleasanton has already approached us. They've had a number of construction contractors that have asked if they can get recycled water. We have already in place a program to allow contractors to get a permit from us and they can come fill up water trucks. We're going to extend that to contractors that have been working with Pleasanton that don't know about our program just yet. And we're going to encourage Pleasanton to finish getting Val Vista Park hooked up to recycled water. All the piping is in place. They just have to finish making the connection and putting the park on recycled water. And again, Val Vista is right next to our wastewater treatment plant. Public outreach efforts, we're going to work to maintain consistent messages not only with our Tri-Valley partners, but also some of the regional agencies. It won't make any sense if East Bay Mud's giving a completely different message than we are, even though we're on different water sources. So we want to work closely to make sure that we don't confuse our customers by what they might hear on the radio from us versus someone else. We're looking at doing neighborhood meetings so that we can offer information on how to conserve water at home, what's going on with the water supply, and tell customers about what they can do in their home to conserve water. And that might also extend to talking to the Rotary and Lions Club and HOAs around the area that also need those kind of tips and that kind of information. And we're looking at making presentations, of course, to the city councils to keep both Dublin and San Ramon abreast of what's going on with water supply in our neck of the woods. We also want to meet with the local fire departments to review the locations of the existing recycled water hydrants around the valley. We have a number of purple hydrants, and they have slightly different fittings on them. We did that on purpose so that someone could not accidentally hook up to a recycled water with plumbing that was made for potable and get those switched. We just want to meet with the fire departments to make sure they know there are different fittings, but there is a water supply there that is supplemental or additional to the normal yellow hydrants that they might use. We're also going to publicize the ability or the availability recycled water that we have for contractors at the treatment plant, and potentially conduct some more landscape water audits. And these we've done in the past. The limitation we have is, I guess, staff time, if you will. But landscape water audits are what we do at large landscape users, walk through what they're doing, possibly find ways they can save water with their irrigation system. Now, some of the things that our customers can do, landscape irrigation is by and far our largest use of water in our service area. About 60% of the water that we sell goes for landscape irrigation, so any savings on landscape irrigation can make a real difference in what we see here. Toilets account for about 11%, clothes washers 9%, showers maybe 7%. This information kind of gives you an idea of where the water is being used by our customers. Some of the other things our customers can do, we want to talk to them about checking their sprinkler systems. An awful lot of people have never even opened that plastic box on the outside of the house. They have no clue how it works or what it does. They've relied on the landscaper they hire to take care of it. And I think we're going to encourage them to open that thing up and become familiar with how it's set and what it's doing, because they may be able to save a lot of water. Plus, if they have leaks or broken sprinklers, things like that, or they're just overspraying the driveway, those are all things that they can work on to correct and save quite a bit. There are smart controllers out there people can buy to put on their irrigation systems that if it does rain, it actually turns off the irrigation automatically and turns it back on when the yard starts to dry out. So those are things, there's actually a rebate program that Zone 7 has for upgrading to smart irrigation controllers. And there are a whole host of other things that can be done here, everything from choosing the right kind of plants, fixing leaks, covering pools. If they have decorative ponds, they may want to drain those ponds, take them basically out of service until we're through this drought, and then upgrading to better efficiency for clothes washers, toilets, and all those kind of things. And then everybody always worries about keeping the car clean and good looking. A lot of the car washes in the area recycle the water they use, so they're already doing the kind of things we want to see, and we want to encourage people to use those businesses. Some of the possible long-term initiatives that we want to look at, we're going to be estimating costs and using the return on the investment to try to decide what conservation projects we can actually do and which ones give us the biggest bang for our buck. You know, obviously, we don't want to spend $50,000 to hook up recycled water to one of our pump stations if we use very little water. We may put that money to use for a better purpose where we can save more. We want to continue to look at converting more and more customers to recycled water when they're close, using our AMI system to notify customers and alerting staff when things are going on out there we need to be aware of, promoting perhaps a Cash for Grass program, expanding on the existing program that we have and trying to make that more attractive to customers, installing more recycled water hydrants so it's even easier for contractors to access water when they need it for construction, and making temporary assignments and possibly hiring temporary help if we need to get some of these key projects done. And the last thing here on the list, considering halting new connections to the water system. Of course, this will be obviously a very controversial topic. We anticipate people asking about this, so that's something the board will have to think about and decide on how to proceed with. Okay, so anyway, that's the end of my presentation tonight. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Dan?
Dan, on that mile of pipe that you bought for the other use, do you have an implementation plan to, if you want to do those recycling hookups, to actually get that pipe installed?
Well, the thing we're looking at right now is the feasibility of running the pipe to the areas where we could potentially use it. That was a first step, and of course, getting underneath 680 is a bit of a challenge. I met with the city, and there actually is a Zone 7 drainage canal that goes completely under the 680 that we may be able to lay pipe along. I've got to talk to Zone 7, obviously, before we do something like that, but first step was to find out if it was even feasible, and I think we're getting there slowly. We'll have to work on an implementation plan on exactly how to hook that up. But the city is very interested in it. There are obviously some parks on the west side of the 680 that the city would very much like to keep alive, and And depending on how the water situation unfolds, if there's a restriction and limitation on outdoor water use, those parks could suffer unless we can get recycled water to them.
I have a quick question regarding, are we going to reach out with signs and information to restaurants? And
Yes,
start-
that was mentioned earlier. I had breakfast the other morning at a different restaurant than what was mentioned before, and they told us that they've had that policy kind of in place for a long time. They only provide water to customers when they ask for it. But that's a good point, Director Benson. We do intend to remind the restaurants in the area that that is a good policy to follow if they aren't already following it.
And what about kids are we educating the kids? What's our education program? So our outreach, so sometimes our best defense is an offense, and have the kids start reminding the parents, and the parents reminding,
Yes,
and it cascades out.
right. School kids are an excellent way to modify their parents' behavior. When they learn things at school, whether it's fastening seatbelts or just picking up trash or any of the other things they learn, they can have a big influence on their parents. So we do want to include an outreach to the educational community.
Because I know there's a little packet, we used to use it at the place I work now, and it's a student packet, and kids can actually go and ask and learn how to look at their own water use. So I don't know if we're working with Zone 7 on the educational components. Okay. But I can get a copy of that packet if you need one. What else?
Okay. Any other questions?
What's the status of Cash for Grass right now?
We have a program on the books right now where we provide a certain amount of money for customers that take grass out and put drought-tolerant landscaping in. It has not had much use, and we want to, evaluate whether the amount of money we're providing there is enough to entice people to actually utilize that, and perhaps maybe expand it to look at not just putting in drought-tolerant landscaping, but there are other alternatives to grass. People put fake grass in, and in many cases it can look quite nice.
That's our program with the zones, or?
It's actually a Zone 7 program that our customers are eligible for.
And that's for artificial turf too, or no? Does it include artificial turf or not?
I think the existing program is just to put drought-tolerant landscaping in. So that's why we listed Cash for Grass as a kind of an expansion on that.
Now also, if we need to get some temporary help, I know Rising Sun has done a lot of, they're out of the Bay Area, but they did some energy and conservation audits out for Dublin, so that may be another, they're a youth organization, they're a nonprofit.
Okay.
So that's also a good opportunity to, if you need, because I know we have a limited amount of staff.
Okay, all right,
Or
thank
reach
you.
out.
With all of the efforts to expand the use of recycled water even to West Dublin, that would be funded through Durham? Is that?
Well, what we were anticipating, this would be a DSRSD project, and
Okay.
we were going to encourage East Bay Mud to hook up customers in their neck of the woods to recycle water where they could. But we were looking at it as a DSRSD project, and this would be essentially to make temporary connections. These would not be permanent. Permanent connections would be more expensive, obviously. We have an easement right now to bore a pipe underneath 680 at some point, but getting permits from Caltrans and actually funding that would be a much bigger project than potentially poking plastic pipe through a storm sewer to get it there, rather quickly.
If I could, Dan, all the things that Dan is talking about here, these do not come free. There's a cost associated with all of these. When you approved your rate schedule last year and you set up the drought rates are intended to do two things. One is to give our customers a price signal to reduce water. In other words, their third tier, their high usage gets pretty expensive. But they're also intended to generate some additional revenue that would be needed to fund some of the activities that we're talking about here. So, all these things have, to one degree or another, some financial implications for a district, and we're just beginning to understand those and wrestle with those implications.
Our wells, are any of them reusable?
No, if you're referring to the 3 wells that we used to have here along Dublin Boulevard, those have been long abandoned and physically filled.
Filled with concrete. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, it looks like we're all in for a fun time.
Yeah, interesting.
Certainly gonna be challenging.
She has a different definition of fun.
It's California, so we're all, and I think it's also teaching the kids of our future too.
Well, I believe this is something just like the smoking initiative, you know, you have to, like you said, you have to get the kids involved and yelling at mom because she has the water on, rinsing the dishes, you know, fill the sink, rinse the dishes, put them in the dishwasher. Those things are learned kind of things, and you have to sort of beat it into people's head to unlearn it, so. Okay.
Good presentation. Oh, I know, I do have one, oh, sorry, go ahead. I have one quick question. Have you been working with the California, I know you're on the council, the CUWCC?
Yes, I'm serving on a couple of committees right now.
So have you had outreach and discussions with them on what they're doing?
Well, the council has an ongoing mission for conservation. I've recently served on a committee that was working on some of the best management practices. And some of those, you know, many of the conservation messages and tools that the Urban Water Council has are very applicable to the types of things we're looking at right now. So it's a good organization from that standpoint of providing tools for water agencies like ours on what to do when we need to conserve more water.
All right, good. I know a lot of ideas will come out through their outreach.
Okay, thank you.
So the only thing I would add is, you know, we have two time frames here. We have, you know, long-term interesting ideas, you know, teach the kids and such. And then we have, you know, near-term issues, which we're going to be wrestling with over the next 6 months. And, you know, droughts aren't rare in California, and there's certain blocking and tackling that we know how to do for droughts. The key here in the Tri-Valley, as balkanized as we are with 4 retailers, if you include the, you know, Cal Water and a wholesaler, is we have to stay on the same page. If the zone is asking for 20%, we've all got to ask for 20%. And we've got to put drought rates behind 20%, or it won't mean anything. So, you know, we can agree on it. We're going to have to work together with the cities and Cal Water. This thing's going to get sideways in a hurry. It's going to be hearing, you know, not, you know, cross signals between us and East Bay Mud, but cross signals here in the valley itself.
Well, we have a joint meeting scheduled with everybody at the end of March, right? March
Coming up
27th.
pretty soon.
Is it, Judy? March 26th? No, you would know.
That's the kind of
Okay,
day
thank
that
you.
seemed like it's going to
Yeah, and that would be a great meeting for everybody to attend. That, you know, I mean, should be fun.
Judy,
and then-
where's that meeting going to be? Right here.
Right.
Okay.
And then always remember, you know, the low-hanging fruit is the outdoor water, 60%. You know, I'll probably end up sacrificing my front lawn to this, and as we all probably will. But, you know, as we get creative and work on toilets and whatever, that's interesting. But the low-hanging fruit, you know, where this thing gets solved is the outdoor water use. Great presentations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the lively and such enjoyable.
Okay. Before we move on to item 9B, I think we're going to take about a 5-minute break, if that's okay with everyone.
Holding members of the board, I'm going to quickly turn it over to Redora and Judy, but just to quickly set the stage, you know, it may seem why are we talking about water quality? You know, water quantity is more important, but actually there are some impacts, there are some water quality related issues. But more importantly, we need a little bit of policy level guidance in the near term with regard to working with Zone 7 on their water quality management policy update. And we also wanted to take that opportunity to bring some of the newer members on board who worked around back in the early part of the 2000s about a lot of the work we did on water quality in this district. So,
Okay. Good evening, President Fun here, Leopold, and members of the board. So in addition to managing drought actions, Zone 7 is working on their 10-year CIP program and is seeking retailers' input. We really appreciate Zone 7 working with us on the development of their next 10-year program. Some of Zone 7's CIP projects include water quality improvements, and historically, the district has spent significant time and resources to improve the water quality of water delivered to our customers, and we worked with Zone 7 on those actions. Only two people on the board today, Directors Howard and Halkett, may remember the actions we've taken in the mid-2000s. So the district worked independently and with Zone 7, and this resulted in several projects. One of them is the Mocho groundwater demon plant that was installed by Zone 7. With the downturn in the economy and concerns about rate increases, to improve water supply reliability, Zone 7 delayed additional water quality projects. Now, Zone 7 is preparing their next 10-year CIP program and is seeking our input. Judy Sabato, our CIP Program Division Supervisor, is following this. And Judy will be presenting past and current district and Zone 7 water quality actions. As you listen to the presentation, keep in mind that staff is seeking direction regarding district input to Zone 7 on the schedule of water quality projects in their CIP, and we're also seeking direction regarding the independent pursuit of water quality improvements. So I'll turn it over to Judy.
Good evening. So, as Bert said, the previous presentation sort of added a new perspective to this one. However, we always continue to work on this topic regardless of what else is going on. When Redora mentioned that Zone 7 was working on their CIP and was asking for our input, they actually had a meeting scheduled that got, the topic of the meeting got usurped and became a drought emergency topic. So our scheduled meetings to discuss their CIP have been temporarily put off. Tonight I'm going to go through, as Redora said, I'm going to give you a little summary of what DSRSD has done to understand and to improve water quality, and what they've done individually and what we've done in concert with Zone 7 and other retailers. So before I begin, I'll just define that water quality a little bit. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the EPA sets the water quality standards. So they set both primary and secondary standards, and primary standards are standards to meet human health concerns. And they cover over 100 contaminants and things like metals and cryptosporidium and disinfection byproducts and a number of things. Those are standards we have to meet, and Zone 7 meets and exceeds. The secondary drinking water standards are aesthetic standards. These are recommended standards, and they address things like taste and odor, color, corrosivity. What DSRSD's water quality concerns have been in the past have been related to those secondary standards, taste and odor, and also hardness. And I should mention there is no even secondary standard for hardness. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what can cause these taste and odor issues. Here in the valley, there are times where you can taste the water will have an earthy, musty, or grassy kind of taste. I always think it kind of tastes like that crawl space underneath my house. And when you taste that, that is a result of occasional algae blooms and decay, either in the Delta South Bay Aqueduct or Del Val Reservoir. So there'll be algae blooms. And then they can somewhat identify the chemicals that cause that. That's geosmin and this methyl isoborneo, or MIB, is what you call it. Also chlorides, when they talked about the salinity in the delta coming in, the chloride level would increase. TDS, total dissolved solids, and chlorine residual. These are things when people complain about the taste of the water, it's usually related to one of these things. Hardness. Hardness is typically an issue that we have here in our service area. Hardness is just
as a result of water seeping through the soil and seeping through the rocks and picking up the soluble minerals. So it's the amount of calcium and magnesium in the water. And it's typically measured as calcium carbonate in milligrams per liter. And on this slide, you can see soft is less than 75 milligrams per liter. Acceptable is 75 to 150. That's what we call moderately hard. 150, you'll start to see the scale build up. And over 200 people will start thinking about going to Sears and getting a water softener. So where do we fit in that scale? This is a chart provided from Zone 7, their annual water quality report for 2012. A little summary on what these charts bars mean. The very top, I don't have a, there we do. This very top line, that's the 90th percentile. That's the 75th percentile. This is the average number, 25th percentile and 10th percentile. These are outliers. So at this value, at 250, that means 90% of the values are 250 milligrams per liter or lower. And 10% of the values are 90 milligrams per liter or lower. The average is at about 160, 165 here. So you can tell from the previous slide, this is the range that they're targeting, the moderately hard, and we're above it. Okay, so just as in real estate, water quality, it's all about location, location, location here in the valley. This is a sort of a schematic of Zone 7 system. You can see the South Bay Aqueduct. It's similar to what Amparo showed you earlier. South Bay Aqueduct carrying the surface water from the delta. It also shows the Del Val Reservoir surface water. And there's the two Del Val treatment plant and the Patterson Pass treatment plant. That water gets treated and moved into Zone 7's transmission system from the east. On the west side of the valley, the supply is from the groundwater wells, Chain of Lakes wells, Stone Yard, Mocho, and Hop Yard well fields. So you can see if you're in Dublin, in this area here, water, sometimes the predominant source may be groundwater, but we can also get surface water. And in DSRSD, our surface water can range anywhere from 15% surface water to 85% surface water. So we may have hardness concerns at one time, and we may have taste and odor concerns at one time. So that variation in the valley that you see in the water quality led to the clause in our water contract with Zone 7 that Zone 7 will endeavor to provide treated water that is aesthetically acceptable to the contractor's customers. Zone 7 will blend its different sources of water within its operational capabilities to provide water of approximately equal quality to each customer. So that variation in the valley led to that clause. And in the early 2000s, the retailers focused on water quality, were concerned about the quality being delivered to their customers. They were getting a lot of customer complaints. So they started to work with Zone 7 and encourage Zone 7 to make more positive steps towards dealing with water quality. And at that time, Zone 7 developed a water quality policy and a water quality master plan. And that was approved in April of 2003. And there's four main goals in that water quality policy. The first one is, of course, to meet those primary drinking water standards, and exceed them is in their policy, and which they do. And the second one is to meet the secondary drinking water standards, and in addition to that, to try to mitigate those earthy, musty tastes, and to get the groundwater, to get the supplied water hardness to between 75 and 150 milligrams per liter. The other two goals are related to the non-potable customers and to work to improve the groundwater and surface water quality of the sources. So to do projects in the Delta to help us get better water quality from the Delta. So although we started working with Zone 7 on the water quality policy, and they had a water quality management plan, the projects in that plan were scheduled quite far out. And in addition, the plan was somewhat behind in schedule. So the DSRSD board was concerned that we weren't doing enough to meet our customers' concerns. So we did a study, we had Tetra Tech do a study to look at water treatment options that DSRSD could do to reduce the hardness to that moderate hard level. This study assumed that the Zone 7 projects would address the taste and odor, and that the DSRSD project would address hardness. What we found is it's of course much less efficient for us to try to pull the water that's delivered to our turnouts to treat it and then turn it back than to treat directly at the wellheads. But the cost for a DSRSD alone project would increase the water rates by 30%, whereas the Zone 7 plan project would increase the water rates by 6%. So given that, the board at that time said, well, we'll hold off on doing this project, but we want to kind of keep it in our back pocket in case that there isn't progress on the Zone 7 DMIN project. But they also wanted to understand, what would our customers pay? We know how much it would cost, but what are the customers willing to pay? So they did a survey. They had a firm that called 400 customers. They had 20-minute surveys with each of the customers. And they found out that nearly 60% of the customers thought our drinking water was of fair or poor quality, or drinkability. They also found that about the same percentage was somewhat or very willing to pay 9 to 10% to improve the water quality. So we knew they didn't like our water, but we didn't know specifically what it was they didn't like in it. We were looking at hardness projects. We knew Zone 7 had taste and odor projects they were looking at, but we didn't know what is it specifically that they not like about our water. So we worked with the National Food Lab to do a taste test, and we had a number of different samples of water, and you can see on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, I'm challenged in that way. The right-hand side of the slide has the Arrowhead bottled water, and on the left-hand side you have Del Valle water treatment plant water. And what you have in between, moving from the left over to the right, is the left has more, you can see there's straight well water. Let me find my pointer here. There's straight well water here. This is a Motra 4 well. This is tap water with some RO, so it's low, so it's soft. This is tap water adjusted to a lower hardness, so it's blended. And as you move this way, what you have is Del Valle with more groundwater blend to Del Valle with less groundwater blend. And this is Hetch Hetchy, and this is Alameda County, with a little bit of RO well water as well. So the main takeaway on this one in general is they like bottled water, but they like groundwater a little bit, and they dislike surface water. So in the taste test, it seemed like the groundwater was favored more than the surface water. So then we wanted to figure out, what exactly is it that they like about this groundwater or surface water? So Malcolm Perney did focus groups and looked at correlations between what is in that water and the scores that people gave for different samples. So what you have here is the little black dots are all those samples, and and on the bottom you have, in this case, there's chlorine residual on the x-axis, and you have the flavor rating, how they rated the sample on the y-axis, and they plotted all of the sample points, and they've tried to fit it to see if there's any kind of a trend between that constituent and how well someone liked the water. So what we have in this chart is essentially the correlation coefficients of those trends. So correlation coefficient, if you have a 1, a positive 1 or a negative 1, that means that you have a perfect correlation. If you have a positive correlation, that means the more of that constituent, the more they like the water. If you have a negative correlation, the more of that constituent, the less they like the water. Now, if you focus on the far column where it's not sort of influenced by that bottled water point, which was definitely somewhat of an outlier in the points. If you focus on the, let me see, on the left side, there isn't a real strong correlation, so you're looking for a number that's close to 1. But you can see from looking at those numbers that between total chlorine residual and geosmin, those are sort of the two things that there's a stronger correlation between. If those things in the water, they dislike the water. Not so much kind of surprised with the hardness, although I personally wouldn't trust a correlation coefficient that low. There's a lot of scatter in that. But with the hardness in TDS, in this case, they actually liked it a little more if it had that in there. So at that point, we worked with the Zone 7 on a water quality policy and master plan. We did the study, we did a survey. Also at the same time, or in 2005, we worked with Pleasanton in Zone 7 to do a joint water quality resolution, which laid out a lot of principles on how to work on improving the water quality and some particular projects and things that we wanted to work on together. So we had that. We also did the water quality taste tests and focus groups. So in 2006, the board had decided, well, we'll wait and see what's going on ahead with Zone 7, given sort of this uncertainty of what it is our customers want and what they're willing to pay for it. So in 2009, Zone 7 put in the Mocho DMIN facility. It's a 6.1 million gallon facility. In earlier studies, Zone 7 had determined that at 50, to meet that hardness target that we were looking for, they would need to demin 15 MGD. So we're not quite there. That's why we're not quite meeting the target. We're not deminning all the way up to the 15. It's just the 6.1 MGD. Zone 7 has planned 2 more phases of demin, although they've been pushed out quite a ways. In 2009, also Zone 7 started to add powdered activated carbon at their water treatment plants when they had a taste and odor event. So those 2 chemicals I told you about, geosmin and MIB, you find them in the not parts per million, but parts per billion, where people can notice them. And it takes a long time to test them in a lab and find out. So what Zone 7 does is when they have 3 or more water quality complaints in a 7-day period, they'll start adding that powdered activated carbon at their water treatment plants to try to mitigate that taste and odor. But that's just a temporary measure. It's not that effective, and it's very hard to control. So Zone 7 completed a study in 2011 to determine what we could do to more permanently address the taste and odor issues. And the study resulted in determining ozone was the best way to treat that, and they have projects planned for that. So here's the projects that Zone 7 has planned to deal with water quality going into the future. Now, most of the things we've been talking about were aesthetic concerns, but also just the end of this last year, the state has decided that there'll be a new primary water quality maximum contaminant level for chromium-6. And there are some Zone 7 groundwater wells that are very close to that limit and will need treatment. So now their new priority for water quality is treatment for those wells to meet that chromium-6 limit. And the estimate for that is about 17 million. Oh, my cost disappeared. The estimate for that project is about $17 million. The taste and odor project I told you about, the ozone at the treatment plants, that's been moved to 2018 and to be completed in 2013. And that has a cost of $51 to $54 million. And the next phase of DMIN has been moved to 2008, or 2028, sorry. So that project's been moved out of waste too, and the cost of that project, the next phase, the second phase, was $36.5 million, and the second and third phases together, I believe, was $60 million. So all these projects are pretty expensive, and they've been moved out fairly far into the future. So as Redora mentioned to you, what we're looking for tonight is to get your feelings and your thoughts on water quality, whether you feel that DSRSD should do something individually, and if you feel that the schedule that is set for Zone 7 for these water quality projects, if we should lobby for it to be sooner or later. And I'll take any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Judy? Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, I have a question. Given the taste tests were going back to 06 and 04, what's our current level of evaluation from our customers for our
I do have a slide for you. This is the complaints in 2012. And you can see that actually the highest number of complaints in this case were a chlorinous odor. And I think that was related to a particular event at a wellhead in Pleasanton where they kind of got a slug of chlorine going through. So that a lot of those happened at the same time. You can see there's some earthy, musty complaints and some cloudy water complaints. I don't have a particular event to explain those. But these are complaints that when any of the retailers gets a definite complaint that somebody can be specific and it can fall into one of those categories, then we have a database that we share with Zone 7 and it gets logged. Lots of times customers will call and just say, something's different, something's changed about my water. So when that blend of surface water and groundwater changes, they kind of become concerned because they notice a change and they don't know is this a good thing or a bad thing that it changed. So often they'll call customer service just to ask, what's going on. And our customer service gets information from Zone 7 and knows when things are changing and can tell customers, oh, well, you're getting more surface water, you're getting more groundwater.
So even the board's action at that time was to kind of put things off from DSRSD's perspective. Did we do any kind of conceptual estimating on both scope of what we would be doing, what kind of a plan we would build, and some rough costs?
No, they did do a study, and it did have, I can't give you the exact cost. Like I said, the cost would have resulted in a 30% increase in the cost of water. But what they looked at in that study to deal with hardness or DNIN is they looked at a number of different alternatives of trying to take the water, treat it at the turnouts where we get it, or treat it at 2 different turnouts, or treat it at 1 turnout and then send it back through piping. Or one has, I think the best alternative was to bring some of the surface water to one of our turnouts, treat it, and along with some of the other water from our turnouts and send it back out. So that 2003, 2004, they added more alternatives in that time frame. Did have specific alternatives, and it did have costs at that time.
You mentioned in the report that the plans that Zone 7 was looking at are $100 million between the two of them, plus
it was 35 for the first, and for the second and third would be about 60.
So what, in terms of dollars, what kind of money would we
ours? I'd have to go back and.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Well, roughly if you think about it this way, our operating costs, the impact on rates was going to be almost 5 times more than what Zone 7's costs are. They were looking at a 6% increase, we were looking at a 30% increase. Now we're, in round numbers, maybe 25% of the volume. They're doing the project for Livermore, Pleasanton, and Cal Water. So, we kind of go through that mental arithmetic. I think our numbers for a DSRSD alone project were probably in the same ballpark as the Zone 7 project for the valley as a whole. It was not a trivial expense.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And when you couple that with, we did some opinion surveys of our customers, both on the taste and odor, and Judy reported on that, but we also asked them about what their sort of pain threshold was for improvements of water quality, and that number was kind of in the 10% range. So when we looked at a 30% increase in rates, that
Doesn't work.
Yeah, the board just said, it's better off to let Zone 7 take the lead, it's more cost effective, that seems to be what our customers' threshold is in terms of paying, that's the direction we headed. We haven't done anything on our own accord since then, but that's not to say that the board couldn't direct us to dust off some of those studies and start pursuing those. Strongly about it.
In terms of magnitude of scale, what kind of gallons per day are we talking about that we would be delivering to our drinking water customers?
Oh, you got to do it on, well, we were not talking about demineralizing everything, because then you'd be doing, so I don't remember those. We would really need to dust off that report. It was all spelled out in the report. But, we deliver peak day, Dan, more than 10 million gallons a day now. Don't we?
Yeah, during the winter, 8 million or so, and we're double that or better
So
during the summer
16
months.
million gallons a day in the summer, and we wouldn't be demineralizing that entire
No,
well,
right.
but, so,
Substantial.
substantial.
Okay, any other questions for Judy?
Not a question, but I think you're looking for some comments and or a little
Direction.
So I was gonna tee it up as somebody who actually lived through this, and a couple of observations. First of all, times change. And 2004 through 2008, very, very different times than we have now. It's funny, your DSRSD and Zone 7 water quality action slide could probably use a few other points on it. 2007, the current drought begins. 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses and we have the biggest recession since the Great Depression. 2008, Judge Wanger shuts down the South Bay Aqueduct for 2.5 weeks. The times are very different, and the concerns, at least this board member has, with respect to water, are very different than that. It's a fact of California or Western water if you can't change your source. Those are locked in from years and years of precedent, years and years of who got which water first. And to try to change our source through technological means seems a bit foolhardy is too strong a word, but this doesn't seem something that's quite possible at this moment. Certainly improving filtration and the activated carbon, that's good stuff, but any technology that's going to actually lose water in the process, like going whole in on demin and having what we lose on the demin facility, 12, 14, 15% of the water. It just is, it's hard to support that right now when we're facing actual water shortages. So I'm of the opinion that we live with the water we have. We do the best we can without losing water, do it in a cost-effective way. We're going to need our cash, our collective cash with the zone and all the retailers to do cash for grass and things that are going to actually prolong the use of our water. And we do the best we can, but I think our focus has to be on supply right now.
I was going to say the same thing.
Are you saying that for both Zone 7 and us?
Yeah, keep them on the books, and I know the game the zone is playing because we do the same thing. It's a good project. Don't want to lose it, so let's just keep moving it to the right on the timeline, and maybe someday the world will catch back up with us. So don't. I really appreciate the fact that the projects are on their timeline, and I really appreciate the fact that they seem to keep moving to the right as we struggle with the current problems that we have.
Yeah, our priority right now is with water.
Water supply. Yeah.
Reliability.
And reliability, right?
Yeah, Pat?
The only thing is, kind of looks like you might have to spend some money on this.
The chromium.
Chromium. It may, I don't know, water standards may change again too, so that's something we gotta watch out for. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Rick. It's reliability right now.
Well, I like,
Oh,
Is it appropriate to?
oh, absolutely, we're,
Sure,
we're,
fine.
we're equal.
I know we're so.
And Barbara,
would you come up
if
to
you just
the,
come up,
so it gets recorded,
Yeah.
thank you.
maybe she doesn't want to record it.
The cameras are gone, but you're still on TV.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we record the board.
This could still go back to our general manager, is that what you're saying?
You're going to get nothing but glowing reviews from us.
I know we're still going to have our discussions on the CIP project. I did want to comment on one thing. The Ozone Nation project, it just so happened I was involved in looking at that project and why we needed to move it up, implement it earlier potentially, at least we're recommending that. It's because this is a situation where originally it was envisioned primarily for taste and odor concerns, but it's now become a water supply issue. What's happening is that we don't just need it to mitigate MIB and geosmin, as Judith described. Our treatment plants are actually struggling to treat surface water. That's actually one of the reasons why we had to pump more groundwater last year than we wanted to. We actually had surface water supply to treat, but our treatment plants couldn't handle the water quality coming down the aqueduct. And ozone is believed to be able to adjust that and allow us to maximize treatment in our treatment plants. So that's why that's moved up. So this is a case where water quality and water supply have merged, but there will be formal discussions of that when we get to our CIP discussions with the retailers.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, Angela?
Hi, sorry, don't want someone to take over your discussion here, but I do want to just say, as a board member, I would appreciate you also thinking longer term, because we are going to be adopting a 10-year CIP, anticipating both shortage in the near term, but, you know, obviously we all hope for a better day, and when that better day arrives, we also want to make sure that our CIP covers those events as well. So just because we are in a current shortage and drought, and we're worried about supply and reliability, I would also say that this is the time to put in your wish list, because the Zone 7 board will in fact be adopting a CIP that goes 10 years. And that is not necessarily reviewed as often as some of us might wish. So I just want to caution not to get caught up in the short term, because we will be making decisions on the long term as well. So and your feedback would be appreciated from me, having to make that decision on what projects get moved up or not. Also, I think the chromium discussion is still pretty fluid because the state has not actually set that standard yet. So the cost, I'm not sure about that. We haven't seen a whole lot of numbers. She may have more information than I do, but just so that you know that obviously there will be some action potentially needed depending on what level that is set. And Zone 7 has given feedback along with other water agencies in terms of the reality of the costs of some of those items. So I don't want you to just close the discussion and not also give us feedback on what some of your priority items are for the future looking long term, assuming that we get out of a discussion about reliability and supply, and we can start to talk about back to the things that we normally deal with taste and odor. So thank you.
No, I agree. That's why I couch it in terms of not losing projects, but, you know, I certainly keep moving them down the timeline, and they may, you know, the current reality may catch up with them at some point. We're doing the same thing.
But I think Angela's point's well taken. It seems to me that Zone 7 doesn't as actively approach their 10-year CIP the way we do. So it would be really important for them to, if it's not there, to keep it there, because each year they have the ability to move it out. Just keep it in place. But I would agree with everybody. Right now, our most important thing is supply. Once we get through that, whatever it happens to be, you know, then we can maybe tackle the taste issue again and the odor issue. My body's finally become used to the water, so.
Water tastes great.
We've been drinking it. The hardness too for me. The hardness is still an issue with ice.
Well, yes, because my glasses are no longer all clean, but.
Yeah, and it takes its toll on But, that would be a
This is total on
long-term.
dishwashers and
Dishwashers
dishes
and,
fences and everything else. But anyway,
But it
you can
has
live with
improved.
that if you have the water to
But I
do
can
that
still do
with.
But it has improved
It
over
has
the years
improved.
since,
Yes.
from when I moved here in '76. There's a big difference in the water.
Well, when I moved here in '71, you could boil a pot dry and do a science project with a little mound of whatever it was that was left. I kid you not. So it is definitely much better, and the filters that are on refrigerators these days helps even more. So without a doubt, I think we need to focus as much as we can and work with Zone 7 as much as we can on supply, and do whatever we can. If that means maybe jointly going with Contra Costa Water District with Los Vaqueros, doing rain dances. I was going to invite everybody to do a rain dance after this session last week, but that's where I think we have to focus right now. It'd be nice to focus on taste and quality, but as long as it meets the safety standards, I'm happy with what we have, and our money and our resources need to go in another direction. So is that enough direction?
I think so. This will, this will continue to evolve as we talk with Zone 7 about it, and I think it's going to be a subject of discussion at the March 26th meeting. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 9C.
Yes, President Von Heater, members of the board, I was kind of reflecting on the evening so far, and it kind of reminds me of the old saying, if I had more water, more money, and more people, things would be doing well.
Yeah.
So we've talked about water. I'm going to talk about money right now. I promise you I won't talk about people. The money I'm going to be talking to you about is in the Water Expansion Fund. For those of you who follow the district finances for a while, this is one of our more critical funds. We have to closely monitor this. You'll also remember that in the dark days of the recession in 2009 and 2010, this fund, but for the board's adoption of a temporary infrastructure charge, would have been totally in the red. This fund has recovered significantly since that time. It is not out of the woods yet. And there are some issues that still have not been sort of fully accounted for in our long-term planning for this fund that we want to bring to your attention. And by that I mean, you of course adopted a capital improvement plan and a capital improvement budget last April. But some of these issues at that time just weren't defined enough to be able to throw into that analysis. Since that time, since last April, a lot of these issues we've been able to quantify. Matter of fact, we've resolved a couple of the issues as I'm going to talk about. And now I think what I'd like you to do is step back and look at the bigger picture of what's happening with this fund and some of the things we need to do and give us a little bit of direction. So, the emerging issues, and this is presented for your information so you can understand what the discussion is going to be. And also, they're presented in the priority order that the Finance Committee is recommending that you consider these things. In other words, solve the first problem first, solve the second thing in order second, then the third thing. So this is presented in that priority order. So the first one was to extend the life of the water capacity rights. You'll recall this is the issue where the water capacity rights had a 3-year life, and given the development, pace of development because of the recession, they were expiring. That was creating a huge outcry among the development community, and rightly so. That issue was resolved in October of 2013 when you adopted both a program as well as a code revision to deal with that. That actually had a $105,000 positive impact on this fund, because what you did at that time is said these capacity rights extend indefinitely, but when they're beyond 3 years, if you use them beyond 3 years, you have to true up the cost of those capacity rights compared to what you purchased, actually compared to what the purchase price was at the time they expired versus what the purchase price would be at the time you use them. So there's a little positive impact on the fund as a result of that. The second thing you did, and that's been fully resolved, is to delay the timing of when we receive the payments for those capacity rights. In the past, those were due at the recordation of the subdivision map. You change those basically in line with, I think, what most of the industry in general does, which is to make the capacity payments due at building permit. That didn't change the overall amount of money we're going to receive, because eventually those projects are going to be built, unless you assume some of those are delayed significantly. But it had a significant negative impact on our cash flow for the first couple of years as we transition from getting these connection fees at the time in big chunks for 200 units at a time over these 2 years period to where we're having 5 or 10 units coming in. We estimate on the order of about a 9 to 15 month delay in receipt of payments. So over the next couple or 3 years, that actually had a $6.1 million negative impact on this particular fund. That's a resolved issue. The third issue that's in progress, not fully resolved yet, but we've gotten direction from the board, is that we have an agreement with Windermere DLC. They were one of the major developers up in the Doherty Valley. Their project is essentially done. We're closing out a reimbursement agreement with them, under which they fronted money for us to build capital projects at a time where this fund did not have that money. For various reasons, and I can get into the myriad details of those with you, but for various reasons, the discussions with them are tending to close out that project, and we in fact think we owe them some money. It's estimated about $1.9 million over 4 years that would be paid out to Windermere BLC from this fund. Now again, wasn't accounted for in the CIP projections you adopted last April. This is a new evolving issue. We were just approached by them in 2013 about the closeout. Next one is another a credit against fee program, very similar to the one with Windermere, but this one is still in progress. These 3 developers actually have ongoing projects that could still benefit from the credit against fee program. We're not closing it out, but what we did during the recession, we suspended that connection credit against fee program. The money was coming in, we needed that connection fee money to make those water debt payments. Otherwise, your temporary infrastructure charge would have even been higher at that period of time. So we've suspended that. The developers have asked us to unsuspend that action. Unsuspending that action means we would start giving them credits. That means we wouldn't be getting in the full amount of the connection fee over the next several years. We think that those projects that would be subject to that program would span over about the next 7 years. It would be about a $3.2 million negative impact on the fund, in this case through reduced revenue. The next item is there's some long-standing issues we're still trying to work out with Pleasanton related to recycled water. One of those is the Clean Water Revival Program and a closeout of that. Brief the board on that, and I have direction from the board to try to resolve that. Discussions are still in progress. That emerging issue would actually have a $1 million positive impact on the fund. Basically what it represents is the value to the wastewater expansion fund that the water expansion project, of the recycled water project, now has for disposal purposes in the winter months. We are actually seeing significant amounts of disposal in the winter months. So in effect, what the wastewater customer is doing is deferring the expansion of a future lava project or storage. There's some value in it for them. We think right now, just preliminarily, that's about $1 million benefit to the water expansion. We also have to update the water system master plan. This is a project in your approved CIP. It's in progress. Matter of fact, the engineering department has received proposals on that. They're talking to consultants right now. The significance of that is the last time that water master plan was done was in 2005. We were ready to award an update of that plan in 2010. We like to do these things every 5 years. We were ready to award it, and I pulled the plug on it because, again, we were in the middle of the recession and we needed to conserve every dollar we had. That plan is now 10 years old. It's woefully long in the tooth. The projects really that are identified in there really don't have much resemblance to reality anymore. And furthermore, the expenditures that came out of that water master plan in 2005 was a 15-year plan at the time, basically fall off the cliff in 2020. So we don't have any vision beyond 2020. I don't know what the new master plan is going to result in recommendations for projects beyond 2020. We estimated about an $8.7 million negative hit in the next 9 to 10 years. That basically was the average expenditure we were seeing over the last 3 or 4 years of the life of the current master plan. That's yet to be determined, but you know there's going to have to be further expenditures beyond that, so that's going to have a negative impact on the fund. And then finally, the lowest priority order, at least as recommended by the Finance Committee, is a resolution of the temporary infrastructure charge, paying it back in whatever form that takes. Currently, we've paid back a substantial amount of temporary infrastructure, but there is still a $4.2 million negative balance on that. The schedule on how and then the manner in which that gets paid back is yet to be determined, but the Finance Committee has a few ideas on that we want to go over. So those are the 7 emerging issues. So, okay, that's a lot of information there. We've briefed Finance Committee, and the board's taken a couple actions, so you've seen snapshots of this. We talked to the Finance Committee in July. They gave us the order of things. We've implemented a couple of items, the capacity allocations, the capacity rate system. Those were done by board action in October and in December of 2013. The Finance Committee met again in January of 2014, I should say, and basically looked at this again, and we have a priority, and basically they developed an action plan and asked us to come back to you to ask you to endorse this action plan tonight by motion, and they also want to give you a chance to sort of look at the analysis. It's a very complicated analysis. I'm hoping to boil it down to some colored charts so you can get your minds around it pretty quick. We can go into as much detail as you want on this, and I think the committee and engineering and finance get a lot of credit for pulling these spreadsheets together. Thank you. They're extremely complicated. We can go into as much detail as you want, but I hopefully have a simple way of presenting it to you. But basically, the analysis is looking at the fund balances in the water expansion fund at the end of the next 10 fiscal years. We've done 2 scenarios. One is development as planned. If all the development that we anticipate, and we're fairly conservative with the development, we're not just wildly scheduling projects, but as we anticipate, as we're told by the City of Dublin, the City of San Ramon, by the developers, based on our own information. So we have a development as planned scenario. Then we also stress that development projection. Basically what the stress development means is that from a point in time 3 years from now, we assume that instead of the development as planned, we would only have 60% of those units coming in. Kind of, well, what if? And we could put a different number in there if you didn't think that was conservative enough, or put in a different number and run the analysis however you want. But that's what we use as an assumption. We looked at this as a 10-year analysis, and then what we did, we started with the baseline, and then we loaded in sequentially each one of these emerging issues in the priority order that the Finance Committee asked us to do it. So the idea was, well, let's do the first one and see how the fund balance looks. And if it looks good, let's add the second one in. And if that looks good, let's add the third one, see how far we can get on that spectrum. And the key for you, as I show you this, is to focus on the fund balance as it relates to the target. The target in this fund is 2 years of debt service reserves. We have to, and that's a covenant in our water expansion debt. So that's the target we're shooting for. That's where that number came from. And it's also adopted policy by the board. So this is a complicated chart, but very quickly, you have a handout. There's also, I think, maybe a little bit better presentation in the board agenda packet. But basically what this is looking at is these are the up and down, these are the sequential emerging issues, starting with the capacity rights extension, starting with the paying capacity rights at time of building permit, followed by the priority order by resolving BLC, followed by addressing the other reimbursements agreements, et cetera, et cetera. And each one of these rows is a fiscal year, and there's 10 of them going out to fiscal year 2025. Green is good, it's above the target. Yellow is kind of like a yellow light, it's getting near the target, it's within 15% of the target. Orange, it's below the policy target, below 2 years of debt service. Red, when you'll see it on a couple of these charts perhaps, I'm not sure which one I put in, means you broke, that the fund is broke. So this chart, this is a development as planned chart, shows, we're in pretty good shape for all of the emerging issues, given the assumptions we made, and through 2016. And 2017 might be a bit of a pinch point. I'm not too worried about it. If you look at the absolute value of those numbers, we're pretty close, really only in 1 year. In that year, at that case, do we go below the fund target? Not by very much. I'm not too worried about that. I think we can manage our way through that. If you switch that and same set of assumptions, and you look at the stress development scenario, now guess what? All of a sudden, there's still a fair amount of green, so the 2 policy decisions that you made already are still good. But boy, when you start loading these other ones in about 2017 timeframe, we start bumping into, we start dropping below the policy level targets of 2 times debt service. And in some cases, fairly significantly, to the point if we did everything, including making a temporary infrastructure charge, we're going to run that fund into the ground. So we can't do that. That's perhaps on the table the rest of it.
And this is assuming 60% of the...
60% of the planned development, starting at a point in time 3 years down the road, Georgie. What we assumed is that for the first 3 years, development, it could slow down, but those are generally in the pipeline already. And it's 3 years and beyond that are more speculative. That was the assumption. Okay, so here's so we said, well, okay, let's look at, you know what I did, I'm sorry. Okay, so then we said, okay, let's look at a TIC repayment where we pay, gosh, we have a lot of money in that fund. Let's make the TIC repayment and make that TIC repayment immediately. Let's pay it off right now. I know a few of you have approached me and asked me if we could, and we could, so we wanted to look at that. So this is, again, the plan development, but unlike the previous one, which schedules the TIC repayment in the last several years of the 10-year projection, this one schedules a pretty substantial payoff. I can't read that number. $3.6 million payoff in the first year, basically at the end of this fiscal year. And you can see that that payment of that size on the TIC in the first year drives, I mean, we will be in the red, well, not in the red, but we'll be below bond covenants, be below our target level, even if we agree to make our payments to BLC, unsuspend the other development agreements. Basically, if you tell me to do that, I could not do any of these other things without violating policy or without violating the debt service requirement. So we said, well, okay, what about 3.6 million? That is kind of high. What about a lower number? Where could we manage this thing to? And so again, this is development as planned, not to stress, but if we limited that payment based on current projections at the end of this fiscal year, and I think that number is 750,000, we backed into that number, you can see we can manage the BLC work, we can manage the unsuspending the connection fee credits. We do have one pinch point year over here, again, that's several years out, and hopefully we can manage our way around it. But that's not a bad projection. Now, I'm not here to tell you that we're ready to recommend to go to $750,000 repayment at the end of the year. What we want to talk with you about is, well, this will be the action plan, but let me get the punchline. What we want to talk to you about is what we're calling a water expansion fund management policy that basically prioritizes these things and sort of gives you a roadmap for how to make that decision at the end of each fiscal year as to how much of the TIC you can repay once you know how you perform during that fiscal year and you have some indication what the future fiscal years would bring. So, the action plan developed by the Finance Committee briefed the board on a big picture. That's what we just did. They said continue to negotiate the Windermere BLC closeout. We're continuing to make progress on that. Conditionally unsuspend the credit against fee reimbursement program. The word conditionally means reserve the right to suspend it again if we need to. Affirm the commencement of the water system master plan. I didn't mention it, to continue the discussions for the Clean Water Revival closeout after all that's a positive impact on the fund. And then establish a conditional TIC repayment program. That would be done at the end of each fiscal year. You would have a transfer from water expansion to water rate stabilization. That would represent the TIC repayment. And we do it in a way that would maintain that water expansion fund balance. And the key is moving it to water rate stabilization. There's several reasons for that. One is only the board, not staff under any way, but only the board can authorize movement of money and expenditures from the water rate stabilization fund. So you maintain 100% control of that. You don't run the risk that it's going to be chewed up over the years through little inflationary increases here and there, etc. More importantly, if something ever came up in the future, say development does crash again or something like that, well, that money is not spent. It's sitting there in that TIC fund, in that rate stabilization fund. You can then use that money to make those debt payments out of the water rate stabilization fund, and you're protecting yourself against having to put in place another TIC or a larger TIC. You can subsidize those debt payments out of that water rate stabilization fund. So you're kind of buying yourself a little bit of an insurance policy. And then finally, to prepare a water expansion fund management policy as part of the action plan, consistent with all of this, that would basically say that and bring that back to the board's consideration in March of 2014. And then basically that's it, if you have any questions. But that's a recommendation of the Finance Committee. I turn to President Von Leopold and Director Helkett. We've spent a lot of time going over this. It's fairly complex when you get into the details of the spreadsheet. Hopefully we presented it to you in a way that you kind of visually grasp what's going on in this straightforward way.
Will this be the only fund that has its own separate management policy?
The other ones all have, the direct answer is yes. The other funds all have a policy that talks about fund balances and how much money we're supposed to have in targets and things like this. But this one, the fund management policy, would be specifically saying how you make a decision at the end of the year about transferring money to the rate stabilization as the TIC repayment, doing it in a way that will enable you to keep control of that money and perhaps use it if the situation ever got bad again.
It's a unique fund. I mean, it's the only fund we have that has us, developers, the ratepayers, and bonds all playing within the same pool. I mean, regional is another big fund, but we did all that work ourselves. We didn't have these swap deals, these crazy,
Right.
Build me a reservoir over here, and I'll give you some credit against something you may do in the future. And then they pay you Tuesday for the cheeseburger I just had. But so this fund's unique. I'm totally happy having this thing happen its own
Beat all the
plan.
ping pong balls under the water.
And if it's not intuitive, is my thought process on the way we order these things was almost an inverse order of how we get sued if we didn't do it. So BLC is a contractual, one of our core principles is to honor our contracts. So BLC is a contractual obligation. We have to do that. We can't with a straight face keep these reimbursement programs suspended forever. So, it's a contractual obligation. We have to do it. And then, so on down the line.
How does everybody else feel?
Oh, I think.
That's about as rigorous an analysis I've seen in any kind of exercise. That's very well explained and very, I would endorse it.
I would endorse it.
I have to say I give our staff a great deal of credit because for me, I actually have to see these things in the little graphs. I can't picture them floating around in my head. And this helped me put it in focus and decide which was the most important and which could wait, why, and still maintain all those other policies we have, like honoring contracts and things like that. And the word that we all made about even repaying TIC at some point, trying to get that in the mix. So I'm very pleased with the way it sets out on paper. And I expect that our staff will keep our nose to the grindstone and make sure we adhere to it. And when we don't, we'll be told.
If I could offer one last comment. One of the reasons we're asking you to adopt this policy is, you saw in 2013, huge, pretty significant turnover in senior management staff. Of course, you all, if I can be so bold, hold your jobs 4 years at a time. I'm not going to be here forever, and this is the fund, and these obligations are the kind of things we need as a district to maintain a long-term focus on it. So the way you do that, I believe, is have a worked out policy, so your successors, my successors, and staff successors know why we did it and where we're going
Right.
with things, rather than all of a sudden you're flush with cash in 2017 and decide to, do something and do it miss the bigger picture.
Plus it shows our bond folks.
Absolutely.
It shows
The commitment.
the commitment, because right now, all the bonds, water bonds are really
Taking a huge hit.
Huge hit. So this is, no, I agree with it. I think it's a good policy. I think I like this scenario with the initial tick of 750,000. I like that.
Yeah, we'll calculate that at the end of the year, but we think that's about what it's.
It's a good scenario.
Yeah.
It's a good, solid scenario versus, yeah.
Okay, do you need a motion?
Yeah, I would actually like a motion, President Von
I'll
Heer,
make a motion.
to endorse the priority order, because that really sets the, the marching orders for staff here, and then we'll bring back the management policy to you in March.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we direct staff to compile a draft water expansion fund management policy, given the outline we just received. The order.
The priority order.
And the priorities, correct, and that the priorities are in the order that was presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion unanimously, I think, carried.
One more item.
One more item. And I said we weren't going to talk about having more people. We're not talking about having more people, but we are talking about personnel matters here. So I'm going to turn this one over to Michelle. So grant notice of public, I guess you have the staff report. This is actually the first reading of an ordinance, so we have to do a few procedural things.
Can I move that we waive the reading?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll second that. I'll second that.
It's been moved that we, usually you can do that in one thing, one motion.
It would still be appropriate to read the title, even though it sounds silly,
Okay.
but that's
Is
what
it
the
a very
statute
short
says.
title?
This is not too bad.
That we waive the motion, or no, we waive we waive the reading of the ordinance repealing Chapter 6.0 Personnel Merit System of the District Code and replacing Chapter 6.10 Personnel Merit System to the District Code, and schedule the ordinance for second reading at the board meeting on February 18th, 2014.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Go ahead.
And we don't want to hear anything from Michelle.
Not today.
Not today.
Let's do a second reading.
Yeah. Pat seconded.
Yeah.
Pat seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion unanimously carried.
Should have seen your eyes.
Yay. You wrote such an excellent report, we didn't need to have you give it to us.
The minutes will also note that there was no one in the audience to give public comment.
Yes.
Since we have a public hearing, it was so quick.
Right, the public
Barely
doesn't
noticed.
want to make any comments, right? You didn't even know what we were talking about, huh? Okay, board member items.
None.
I got one.
Ah.
Thank you so much to staff and to Zone 7 and to our president and for all the work they did for the John Laird event. I think it was a great success, and I want to congratulate you all for what a great job you did.
Thank you very much.
It was a wonderful,
We'll make sure she hears that.
or you can watch it on TV.
What a,
Yeah, definitely.
And I also want to make a note that we have combined our external affairs and personnel committee, so it's all on one night. So that saves staff some time, and we appreciate the ideas. Thanks
Definitely
to
well done.
Michelle and Bert. So thank you.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Pat?
Nothing here.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the presentation by this Secretary Laird at the January 30 meeting. And, it was an excellent presentation that generated a lot of positive comment. That kind of brought the subject home to everybody. And a very good meeting.
We actually did receive a lot of positive comments, and I wanted to make sure you pass along to Sue how much I appreciate everything you all did, as well as her staff in making it happen. DSRSD got, along with Zone 7, got some good brownie points that evening, and we've been asked to think about doing an update in around June-ish, when the water year is, I don't know, more stable. Ha ha ha. So we have to keep that in mind. The other thing I have, and again, this is for Sue, is that Bev Lane gave me this reunion book, which is 1960 to 1997, 37 years of service in fire suppression, prevention, EMS, and education. And it was the Valley Community Services District Fire Department, the DSRSD Fire Department, and the Doherty Regional Fire Authority, and it was their reunion dinner. And I was given a copy, and so Steve Manier made another copy to give to DSRSD for their non-existent, and I hope we find someplace for it, archive. And then also, both of you guys can make the LAPA meeting tomorrow night?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Be excited.
Okay. And I think that's all I have then. So if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
That's one I can remember.
Let's just see how it plays out. Yeah. You're a circus. I'm trying to get you.